Welcome to Coaching in Session,
where limits end and growth begins.
Hosted by Michael Rearden.
This is your space to challenge the ordinary,
unlock your potential,
and step boldly into your next chapter.
Your mindset journey continues.
Welcome, Catherine Crestani, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm so great, Michael. Thank you so much for having me here.
Of course. I must be in a good mood because you and I were giggling like we were like kids in middle school, or like not listening to the teacher, because we have a good conversation about to happen. The work that you do is definitely going to be talking about a lot of the bases that we talked about before, but you are an inner authority guide, writer, and speaker. And the conversation is going to look at how modern connections today are so wildly different from the past, and then how people are living emotionally today, where a conversation like what you and I will have would be a dream of someone else's, because they would say, I wish we can have a conversation like that with our peers, and everyone's so glued to their phone, or they're so infatuated with the newest trend or the latest video. And I can see that being an obsession in so many regards and so many rights today. And we're going to be unraveling all that in just a moment. But if you could, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help people?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I do is most of the people I work with end up being women, but I also attract men into my world too. I not discriminate, but so I support people with feeling connected back to themselves, because we become numb and we push aside who we really are to meet other people's expectations. And often the people that I attract into my world are people going through relationship breakdowns, marriages ending, these big events that happen in our life. And sometimes we can trivialize how big it is, because it is often losing a dream or a dream not coming true. And it can even be with relationships and careers as well. So those that I work with, we really practice, well, not even practice, we put into place ways to support themselves and actually bring some joy and excitement back in their life, so we can have giggly conversations and be excited to get up in the morning rather than keep hitting that snooze button. Or in my case, I know I had avoidant behaviors where I just stayed later and later at work to avoid my ex-husband, or however that looks, So that in a nutshell is what I do. But a lot of it is learning to listen to that little voice inside you, which I call inner authority, but it's also intuition, that inner wisdom. But so often we discount that, but that is truly where our power lies, when we learn to listen to those voices inside ourselves, not the crazy ones in our head.
Yes. Oftentimes in personal development, especially if you deal with someone who's been doing it for a long time, there's different terminologies for different things. And someone can say something and mean the same thing, but just use a different term or different terminology. And the word you use is feeling numb. And oftentimes that's going to be in conjunction with what I would say would be feeling stuck. So a lot of people, they're feeling numb, but numb is a different feeling than stuck. Because if I'm stuck, I can't move. If I'm numb, I can't feel. And when we start to feel this numbness in our life, what are some of the things people naturally gravitate toward?
Avoidance. I feel like that's the biggest thing, like not just in my life, but we will bury ourselves in technology, or we'll just start doom scrolling and get sucked in, or we download those addictive games. I know I'm guilty of doing that every now and then, or binge watch TV. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. Sometimes we need those to just reset and just have a moment, and, but it's what you do afterwards. If that is a habit you're doing every day, or constantly giving in. That's the other aspect where, I really feel like I want to say no to that, but I'm going to say yes to that. That whole people pleaser kind of analogy will come in there, because then you're discounting how you're feeling about that moment, and then all of a sudden my body literally went numb. I actually went numb staying in my work position when I wanted to leave. Like, I literally lost feeling, because that's what can happen too. If you keep pushing away what you're feeling on that deeper level, your body will start to express it as well. And this is where I physically went numb, but at the same time, I was numb in my first marriage, to the point that I was considering having an affair and all these sorts of things, because I didn't know who I was anymore. I just wanted to feel again. And this is where we can then make these decisions. And you're completely right. It's different from being stuck. Stuck is when you feel like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to move backwards. I just feel stuck. Numb is to a point where you don't even look You look in the mirror and you don't even feel anything. You don't recognize yourself anymore. You're not feeling in life. You're just walking through like a zombie. And that's not a way I want to live, let alone anyone else I want to live that way either.
Yeah, there's so many people living in that numbness, whether it be marriages or career or just their personal development themselves, where they see themselves, but they really can't dig deeper than the top shelf, right? Just the surface level. Everything is surface level, right? To get down to the roots is going to uncover so much trauma, so much hardships. And oftentimes when people, they have an option to throw things in the closet or to sweep things under the rug, they'll opt for that option more readily than saying, let me go through this. Because if you ever had to move, for example, from your house or your apartment, you don't realize how much stuff you have until you have to move all that stuff. It's so funny because you're looking at all this space. You're like, I think I have space for another chair. And when you have to move, you're like, man, it's going to cost me XYZ amount of dollars to get the movers to move everything, or it's going to take me this many days to move it. And we just get so cluttered, whether it be physically or mentally, where it's hard to even be able to move. And if you know, like if you ever like in a TSA line, right? It's the claustrophobia. You feel like you don't have enough freedom. And in a sense, right, people feel like that in life. It's just like, well, I can't move forward because I have this obstacle. I can't move back because I come this far. So there's just so many different mindsets that happen within a person's life. And I can't help but wonder, what would a person do if they finally realize that they're numb? They want to make some changes. What's the first step?
Actually, it's finding something that brings you joy again, right? Something that lights you up again, because that can be the quickest way to pull us out. You know, it's like when you're around a child laughing, you can't help but laugh because it's just so free and innocent, you know, and that's the kind of feeling we need to get back in ourselves because, you know, and it can be something as simple as you wake up and you put your favorite music on really loud while you're getting ready. Or I know for me, when I was driving to work and I'm sitting in traffic, I'd just turn the music up and be dancing. And I'm like, who cares? No one's looking anyway, you know, whatever, you know, but it was enough to shift my mood and enough to shift me and make me feel again. So for me, it was music. It's always been music. I love music. But at the same time, for other people I know, I've held things with my clients and they're like, I just gave them a space to paint. And they're like, oh my goodness, I forgot how much I love doing this, because we put it aside and say it's a trivial thing, right? That's not going to earn us money, or that's not going to earn us, you know, that's not on our to-do list. But it should be on your to-do list, because that is that activity that will give you more energy throughout the rest of the day. So if you want to just start small, find that thing that excites you. And if you're not sure anymore, because we evolve and we change, experiment. Like, I'm curious about that pottery class. I'm going to go make a thing. That was terrible. I'm not doing that again, but that was a funny experience. You know, like just being curious about life again can be a beautiful way to pull you out of that numbness and allow you to go explore and maybe find something new, or find something new that you're passionate about too.
There's a saying, if you had a bad day, hang out with a 4-year-old. Just hang out with them, have a good time. And I remember this is one of the stories. Back when I was done with college, I was teaching. I would buy a lot of Groupons. Groupon was big back then. It's you know, people still use it, but it was really big back then. I would buy Groupons for every weekend. I was like, what am I doing this weekend? Let's see what's on Groupon. And when I found a class for fencing, you know, like the fencing class, I said, well, I never done fencing before. Let me go. And it was a class for 2. So I invited my brother. I said, would you like to go fencing with me? He goes, yeah, sure thing. Well, little did I know this classing was a fencing class for children. And so we used foam swords. We didn't even get to use the real swords. We used foam swords. And it was a lot of fun because my brother and I, even though we were going against each other, at some point we went against the kids in the class. So we just lost purposely, and we were so dramatic when they stabbed us. We just fell on the floor. The kids weren't following the rules. You're supposed to take 3 steps. They took 17. So it was a mess. But the experience overall, even though it wasn't as I envisioned, it was so much more profound, where it led to so many more experiences. Because I could have said the perfect experience for my fencing class would have been me and my brother going and sparring and me winning, right? So I could have just said something along those lines, right? The fencing class in my mind was a success. But this right here, the curveball was like, man, like, am I going to be upset about this? Or am I going to allow this experience to like really teach me something, to invigorate me? And I know there's sometimes people that get stuck in perfection where they want everything to be perfect before they take a step, or perfect at the end of it when they look at everything, whether it be a marriage or a diet or a gym. It's like, if it's not perfect, they don't want to do it. And a lot of people don't start because it's not perfect. What do you say to the people who are in this mindset of perfection?
Well, life isn't perfectly perfect. I actually used to teach a masterclass on this because it was such a big thing, right? Like, life isn't perfect. And it's funny you bring up children, because for nearly 20 years, I worked as a speech language pathologist with children, and with children with autism spectrum disorder. Now, let me tell you, Michael, you cannot be perfect with these children, because they will come in and there is no plans. You cannot have a plan, because if they're in a meltdown day, you just might need to be a calming presence in that moment. If they're having a day where they're obsessed over a certain toy, your whole session just needs to originate around that toy. And the best thing you can do is come in with no plan. So I learned very early on, perfect is whatever it ends up being. Everything is divinely perfect, but at the same time, it's not always how we have to control it. And the more you try and control things, the more you're anxious and fearful about what happens if it doesn't work out. So what I've learned is the more I've let go of control, the more freedom I actually have. And it's so counterintuitive, because we think, oh, but if I micromanage this, or I make sure everything happens, life doesn't happen that way. And I normally laugh about it. I am that person that will laugh at when things go pear-shaped, or something goes, crazy, or, I go to shake the orange juice and didn't put the lid on properly, and half the orange juice ends up everywhere. But I laugh, and then at the same time I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to take me so long to clean up. But clearly there's a bigger reason why that happened. And sometimes it might just be you have to laugh in that moment. And if you can't laugh at yourself, go work on that.
Yeah.
Because you need to.
Just this past week, I had a spill with the raspberries. I was coming in and I was trying to do everything all at once. And you know how it is when you get groceries. You don't want to take 50 trips. You want to take one. So you say, all right, I'm going to do everything at once. I'm going to carry this bag, and then the raspberries for some reason weren't in a bag. And I said, let me just put it on top of this thing. Mistake number one, okay? Because I didn't even get 2 steps before those raspberries spilled all over the garage. And I was like, well, I guess I have to pick them up. And while I was picking them up, I was just thinking, what if I just took a step back and realized that this is not a good idea, right? I knew it wasn't a good idea when I did it. I go, this could be very bad. But there was a part of me that said, what if I succeed, right? So it was this idea, right? Where I talk about, or we talked about this kind of like a very quick point of the inner voice, where this inner voice is going to maybe be your best friend, or it could be your worst enemy. Perhaps at that time in the garage with those raspberries, maybe it was trying to be my best friend, because it would have saved me 10 minutes working with these raspberries. But after I was done with it, I was able to appreciate something that I wouldn't have if I done everything the right way, where I couldn't slow down, where I couldn't appreciate. There's people who can't even afford raspberries. There's people who can't, or don't have running water to wash the raspberries that are now dirty or something. So I basically started to have a different way of thinking after it happened. But then sometimes that inner voice can be negative. It can be, man, I'm so stupid for dropping the raspberries. I should have listened to myself. I should be better than this. So it's like we can train our inner voice to be better, but so many people don't do the work to train it. Their inner voice is negative. What is your advice for helping people with their inner voice and making it more, for lack of better
Positive,
words,
supportive.
nice?
Yeah, nice. Well, you're talking about your inner critic. We're our own worst inner critics, right? Like, this is what it comes back to. There's actually energetically in the metaphysical spiritual world, there is actually a space so we have an electric field around us, if you will, and it's called a biofield or an aura, if you will, and the woo things, but science has measured it, right? So we have a biofield. Just to the right of our kind of hip, just on the outside, there's this space, and it's called the inner critic. And that is where all this kind of energy and negativity kind of gets stored. And the more you feed it, the more it grows. So what can happen is people think that that is their beautiful inner voice, their intuition. I can tell you right now, your intuition if it needs to be harsh, it's because it's protecting you. Like I had my inner voice said at one point, quit, like as in quit your job, you need to quit. Like that was it, quit. I was like, ooh, okay, I need to listen to that. Whereas the inner critic would have gone, as if you can quit your job, like where's that money going to come from? Different kind of energy. So when you get those inner critic feelings, what I started to learn to do was, first of all, one top thing I heard, which I tried and I liked it, which was when you get one negative thought, replace it with 3 positive, try and counteract it that way, which is part of like neuro-linguistic reprogramming and that sort of thing as well. The other thing I like to do is go, that ain't happening. Cancel. Just cancel it out. I'm like, I'm not entertaining that, because the thing people don't realize is that if you let those thoughts reside in your mind, you'll actually start to project that out into the world and pull that into your space, because what happens inside of you ends up being reflected on the external part of you. So your example of, picking up the raspberries and finding the blessing in that, you're almost blessing the mess, right? Bless the mess. So this is where finding the good when all those things happen. I say a little prayer when I go to sleep at night, which is thank you for the good I cannot see, because sometimes we have to find the gratitude. Otherwise we get stuck in all that inner critic and all those negative things. And sometimes the negative needs to happen in order for us to appreciate, first of all, the amazing things, but also there's something bigger going on and we never really know what that is. Sometimes it might take us a year to see the other side of it and we go, oh, I understand now. There was this meme that kept popping up on my Instagram with Sheldon reading like a thing going, why? And then he's like, that's why. That's often how we feel, right? So for anyone who's finding that inner critic is running their life, I would say if you can't shift that yourself, that is when it's really important to reach out for support and find someone to help you with your mindset, because it's more impactful than what you realize. And even, I think it's like 80% is emotion, 20% mindset, but still that mindset will stop you from shifting the emotions. It will stop you from doing those things. It will stop you believing in yourself. And if you find it difficult to believe in yourself, it's really hard to be your own cheerleader, right? It's really hard to move forward and make those voices or those feelings nicer that are coming up. And it's not to dismiss feelings. There's no good or bad feelings, but if you're constantly depressed or you're feeling angry all the time, talking to somebody that can support you through that can be a really powerful thing to do as well, because sometimes we can't see what's going on that deeper level. My old coach used to say to me, a mirror can't see herself, so sometimes we need someone outside us to help us piece it all together as well. The other aspect of that is that if we had better friends, we wouldn't need coaches, because like you said at the start, sometimes these conversations we have and they're more deep and connecting. Why can't we have those with our friends? Because sometimes our friendships end up being quite shallow because we're not being able to express ourselves fully or say, yeah, I'm going through all of this. And we get stuck in kind of that victim story rather than realizing that we can shift ourselves out of it.
Yeah, very true. Maybe this is why I don't have many friends. I have a lot of people who will come in and be acquaintances, but when it comes to that friend role, I will call you out if you're not doing something, and I want it reciprocated. If I'm not showing up, tell me I'm not showing up, because then I'm going to maybe smirk like, really? And then I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, oh yeah, you're right. Because it's not so much of me yelling at somebody or me complaining about someone or me trying to belittle someone. It's me trying to help someone become aware of a blind spot that they have. And I can't imagine how many people are living in blind spots because we have all of this technology, right? We have our cars, our fancy cars. We have our blind spot detectors. So when we want to turn, we don't have to turn our head anymore. Literally, the car beeps and yells at us saying, don't do it, dummy. Is a car there? And we're like, okay, great.
I'm laughing because I don't have that car. I have a very low tech car. I hate the tech.
Well, if you don't, then you have to do the old school way of looking. But if you don't, right, then you're going to be having some big problems. So this idea of whether you have the technology or not, right, is still the aspect of we should be turning our head, because it doesn't matter. Like the books say for the DMV, right, when you're going for your license, it doesn't matter about your blind spot detector to turn your head and to look yourself, because you never know when there's a car shifting lanes. Technology can only go so far. And I say this because technology can only go so far because we have our cell phones, we have our computers, us today, we're speaking virtually, right, from across the globe, where we can be connected for a moment and possibly even for a lifetime. But how we use that can be scary in some regards, where people will use it to escape their life, maybe. People will use it to feel disconnected from a person. And so these outlets of being connected or using technology to develop some connection. I know there's a lot of people who go to AI now for coaching. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
be my life coach. And then they, ask all these questions. It's so funny because even I have clients who have done it. And the moment they get me, and I'm not no AI, they go, wow, big difference, right? Because you have a real person looking at everything. And it's the same thing as the technology looking in your blind spot. Hey, I see your blind spot, just to let you know something's there. But it's not until physically you look or you have someone else look with you can you truly understand your blind spots, because we can look for all the good things, right? They're programmed to also say good things, not negative things. So the AI is going to tell you all the beautiful things that you are versus the hard truths, right? And sometimes we need that hard truth to say, hey, let's pay attention. Let's look at where we are. And many people, they are in this emotional weakness state. And I'm just going to call it that. You can call it with whatever you want, where they don't want to get anything more than the good news. So they don't want the like the critiques that are, even if they're positive, they don't want the bad news. They just want all of the good. In life, we know it's not going to just be all good. It's going to be the bad too. And it's when we can look back at the good and the bad, we can say, wow, that life is really enjoyable, or my life can be really enjoyable. Because I think so, people, they get so fixated on the bad, they can't even appreciate the good or even see the good.
And I guess this is that reflection too. You can't have the highs without the lows. Like if you just were the high all the time, how do you have, and I'm not talking about drug high here, but if you were having the highs in life all the time, and not having that balance of the lows, how do you experience that joy or that excitement or however that shows up? I'm, tapping quickly into astrology. Like I'm a Cancer sun, Cancer moon. I am one of the most emotional signs you'll find. And I would just start crying. And my husband's like, why are you crying? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just really sad. I need to cry. And then I get it out. And like half an hour later, he's like, what happened there? You're okay again. And I was like, I know. I just had to let it out. I just had to let it come out. And I don't say it's like a bad experience. I said, well, I just needed to be sad in that moment for whatever reason it is, or let yourself be disappointed, but don't get stuck in it. Don't allow that to be the defining point of your life. And I so agree with your analogy. Like even if with technology, you still need to check for yourself. And I feel this is where this shallowness of interactions is coming from, because people are starting to use technology to replace their own voice. They're starting to use technology to get the answers rather than trusting themselves first. And it's beautiful timing, because just yesterday I interviewed this man on my podcast, and he was saying that, he used to go, he was an army in the army, and he came back with a lot of PTSD. And so he was seeing a psychotherapist every week. And he said, but then I started using AI. And he goes, but I would then take what AI said to me, print it out, and I would bring it to my therapy sessions, and she would help me explore that further. She goes, it didn't get into the depth it was. And exactly like you said, they're programmed to be positive. And I laughed because I put in this prompt that I don't know, popped up on my feed or something. And it was, don't be nice, be really harsh with me and tell me what's going on. And so I asked them about, because I was marketing my book, and I said, all right, tell me the truth about what's going on with my marketing. And it's like, you're gone too spiritual, you're being too woo, your book's a loneliness psychological thriller, stop being woo about it. And I was like, and it's like, and you're afraid to put yourself out there to market it. And I went, oh, it's so true. Why are you so harsh? And I was like, actually, I asked you to be that way. Thank you. And I get cranky when it panders me. I get cranky when it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I didn't do that correct. I'm like, I know, just do your job, do what you need to do. But this is where, the limits are. Even I was talking to a relationship coach a few weeks ago, and she said that she had a client who was using ChatGPT to reply to SMSs from her partner, like not ask for advice, but actually write the SMSs. And I was like, oh, that's concerning, because you've just lost yourself to technology then. You've just allowed it to kind of, replace it. Or my other thing is when you go out to a restaurant and you'll see people on a date, but they're both just sitting there on their phones, like just sitting there texting, and you're like, are you texting each other? Like, are you actually having a conversation? Like, put the phones away and see what happens. The same with families. They'll go out and they'll all be on their devices. Put the phones away. Even to the point when my son was younger and we go out and we just bring, like crayons and drawing and, he was into Thomas the Tank Engine. So we had all the little trains. We would just bring all these things for him to play while we'd wait for our food, to the point that all the waitresses and the waiters would come up and go, thank you. Well, I'm like, what are you talking about? Thank you for actually letting your child be a child. And we're like, really? They're like, yes, it's so nice not to see him on a device. And it wasn't just once that happened, it was multiple times. And we found it so interesting because that was just our default, and we have, I have a lot of friends and they do the same thing. But again, it's who you choose to put yourself in the circles with. The idea of going out and letting my child just sit on an iPad used to just blow my mind, like it was just, my son didn't even know what it was until I started bringing it home from work. And he was just like, Mum, is this a big phone? I was like, yes, that's what it is. We'll go with that. Now
Let's call grandma
9.
on it.
Exactly. Now he's 9. He's a bit more cluey, knows what it does and everything. But at the same time, you can make those choices on how that shows up in your life. And you can choose how much you want to rely on technology. But it's when we put all our intention and energy into it that we disconnect from ourselves as well.
It's this idea of distracting ourselves as well, because if we don't really have to think deeply on something where someone else would do the thinking or an AI would do the thinking, then emotionally, we don't have to feel the feeling, right? We just have to feel the result of what is the answer that is given. Okay, we have to do this. How am I going to feel? Because I have to do this. Oh man, this is going to be a lot of work. Oh, this is scary, right? So I'm just feeling that, right? But you're not feeling everything from the inception. It's like, okay, I'm doing this by myself. I'm investigating this. I'm hopeful, right? Versus I'm typing, right? Because when you're typing, you're not going to necessarily be thinking. I always tell people when they journal too, it's better to use a pen and a pad to write it out than it is to type it. I've done both, and I have found that a pen and pad just works better for the mind, where we can create more authority in our life when we're doing that, because we're saying, this is my attention right now. Very similar to what parents do with their kids. I want to distract you so you don't bother me. We're driving. I want to focus on driving. You focus on the iPhone, your YouTube kids, whatever you're watching or playing. Just don't get in my way of driving. And many people in life, that's what they are. They are so focused on one thing, where if that one thing goes wrong, it's like, oh, everything's going to go wrong now from here on out. So we, as business owners, our podcast doesn't work. Oh, everything is going wrong today. Our car didn't start. Everything's going wrong today. Our partner is not doing what we like them to do. Everything is going wrong today. It's just like one little thing can topple our whole entire blocks of Jenga, right? And we know that typically, if you move one block of Jenga, it's not going to topple the whole thing over unless you're a jerk, right? So you are typically pretty meticulous. Every single night, you're like, okay, I'm going to put this tower of blocks the best I can every single day. And the first thing I'm going to do in the morning is I'm going to, move a block. Sometimes you go for the easy ones. You're like, okay, which one moves very easily? And sometimes you find the ones with a little bit more friction. Right now, this is all mindset. The one with the more friction are going to be maybe your high priority tasks, where it's like, if you do these things, you're really making some progress, versus just the easy ones. You're just kind of going through the motions in your day. You're waking up, you're going to the bathroom, you're getting ready to go to work. You go to work, you are at work, you do whatever work is, you come home, you sit on the sofa and you relax, right? You get ready for the next day. So many people are living in this rat race of life, Monday through Friday, and they are looking for the weekend. And the weekend goes by so quick. And I can't even tell you, like, the last time I said, man, I can't wait for the weekend, because I work all the time, number one. But then number two, it's like, it doesn't matter what day it is. So thank God I have a phone to tell me the date, but I very rarely use my phone for like texting and like calling. Like, if you call my phone, good luck getting to me, right? Same thing in social media. I know I have a following and stuff, but hey, you're going to get my assistant. She's going to let me know if anything's important. If you need me, sign up for a consultation, contact card. Someone's going to get to you, right? And if you really need me, you can get me. But this is this idea. Now, if you really want something, you'll go get it. And there's so many people who kind of just live by the waysides. For example, I want to give you an example. There's a guy who reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he was inquiring about being a guest in the podcast. And I was like, okay, he was just saying about the podcast or whatever. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And he ended the conversation of, if you ever need a guest on your podcast, let me know. I'm thinking, well, there's a long wait list. I don't really need guests. There's a large queue of people who want to be on the show. And you're over here not asking. Why in the world am I going to give you what you're not even asking for? So there's a lot of, talk there where people, they hint at things, but they don't really direct themselves to things, whether it be, internally or just, verbally saying, hey, this is what I want. And there's so many people who don't know what they truly want. And then very similar to that girl looking for the responses to the messages to the guy, how could she ever know what she really wants if the AI is basically saying everything that is supposed to be said? She doesn't have a voice there. And then at that point, they lose their voice, they lose their identity.
Yeah, 100%. And, so often we don't tell people what we want or we need. And I know, especially as women, we're more guilty of it because we just think they're going to intuitively know. Me staring at them is going to remind them to go take the rubbish out. Actually, no, you might need to vocalize that. Hey, do you mind taking the rubbish out? And it really does, like you said, depend on your mindset too. And for me, sometimes it can be overwhelming, because I've got these, I've got my clients, I've got my podcast, I've got, my writing, then I've got my mum duties and then everything else. So often when you wake up in the morning, you've got that Jenga tower. It's like, okay, well, what's the highest priority thing I need to get done today? And then when you get that done, it feels really good. But at the same time, also acknowledging all the little things, because I don't realize how much I do. I'll get the washing on, I'll make my child food, and you just go into this automatic pilot. Yesterday I was sitting there and I looked around and went, wow, I've actually done a lot in the last hour. Like somehow I've done this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, okay. But at the same time, somewhere in there, you need to make time for you too. Like you're saying that you work every day and that sort of thing, but you love it, right? You enjoy doing what you do. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of working every day if you're not enjoying it or, being excited when your clients get a breakthrough or however that looks? And I had a client a few weeks ago, and what came through when we were doing the session together was choose your level of suffering. Do you want to suffer for someone else's dream, or do you want to suffer to create the life that you choose and you desire? Because then you don't mind getting up at, what time is it now? It's 6:30 here, 6:30 a.m. here. But I've been up since 5, right? You don't mind getting up that early because you're doing something and sharing your story or doing something you're passionate about. You don't mind getting up 15 minutes early if it means you get to have that quiet time by yourself. And I know as being a mom, that sometimes you can plan that as much as you like, and then your child wakes up anyway, and then you're like, oh, there goes my quiet time. But that's okay, because you just learn to pivot with that and just, try not to let that define the rest of your day. Exactly like you said, Michael, because when you fixate on that one wrong thing, I can guarantee you the rest of the day will feel like that. And from working with children for so long who are little emotional radars, if you're having a bad day, and you were a teacher, right? So if you're having a bad day and they walk into your space and feel you're having a bad day, I promise you, your day will get significantly worse, because they're just mirrors reflecting that back to you. If you find everyone around you is saying the same thing that's triggering you, it's a mirror of what's happening inside you. If one person says it, it could be a projection, which means they're trying to tell you how they're feeling. And sometimes we can take that personally. I like to say, you can have that back. Thank you very much. I don't want that, But if you have multiple people saying the same thing, or multiple incidences around you that are triggering the same feeling in you, that is an invitation. It is your mirrors, okay, where can I go deeper? Where can I start to shift that so that I can show up again, so that I can, show up at 20%, 100% of my 20%. That's what my old coach would say. Show up at 100, 20% of 100% or whatever it is, show up however you are, and be you, because in the end, that's the most authentic way you can show up, and your energy will be better. You'll feel more like yourself. People might not know how to take you when you start showing up as you, and it can be lonely for a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Like when I left my first marriage, I used to joke that my friends thought they could catch divorce because all my friends who were in couples or married, they suddenly faded off. But it wasn't that. It was that I was reflecting to them issues that were happening in their relationships, and it made them uncomfortable because I'd chosen to leave, and I was happier for that. And when they see that other side and see that other perspective, it can make people feel really uncomfortable. So there's a quote that I love from Ted Lasso, which is be curious, not judgmental. So if people don't know how to take you, it's not you. I can tell you right now, you just keep showing up as you. Some people will resonate with you. Some people will be triggered by you. I'm very good at triggering people, and some people will be, oh, no, she's not for me, whatever that looks like. But at the same time, that's allowing them to start to reconsider where they're at in their life. And that is where you can just show up powerfully and inspire change sometimes in people. You never know who's watching you or who's listening to you. And even I was at a meeting sharing about, the importance of connection with your children and the importance of connection with yourself, and sharing a bit about when I take children, I do a little program where I take children into the Australian bush and we go learn to really connect with nature. And I was sharing about this, and then a few other people in the audience go, yeah, and she has a really good podcast. And I was like, what? I was like, oh, thank you for listening. And then another one's like, yeah, no, she just did this really good. I was like, oh, thank you for listening. Like, I had no idea, because I'm just go record my little episode. I don't look at the numbers or anything. I'm one of those podcasters. But then I was like, how nice that those stories are hitting, that there's that some level of resonance and people are happy to share that, because this is the whole point of these conversations we have, Michael. We hope someone hears this and then is inspired to create some sort of change in their life, even if it's, all right, how do I make sure my Jenga tower is not going to fall down as soon as I wake up and let that define the rest of my day? Or how can I look at my life on the outside and realize that if I change things on the inside, it's going to flow out and change what's happening there as well?
Very true. I know you have many books, but there's one book that's lingering on our conversation today. I think it's so appropriate. It's your novel, My Virtual Obsession, where we talked about loneliness today. We talked about this idea of like, I want to say emotionality, but I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm going to say emotionality, where there's just so much going on. And to navigate through that, and as you said, children are just emotional radars, whether they pick up what we got, like they caught the common cold, or they can see something other adults won't see. And this has happened even in my time as, in teaching, where they can look at you and see something's wrong. Where versus adults are like, hey, I got my own problems to worry about. I don't have time to worry about yours. So sometimes they can be, that support system there saying, I can see what you're struggling with. I don't know how to navigate through that, but I know something is going on. And if they know what's going on and you're trying to hide it and all the other adults can be fooled, it says something about what needs to happen next. We have to take some level of action. So I wanted to, take a dive into, this book that you have written, like the My Virtual Obsession, and to talk about the premise of it and how it relates to the real world today.
Well, when I was writing it, I didn't realize what a reflection it was because, like you said, pen to paper. But I kind of go into this process where I just kind of channel and let the words flow through me. So I didn't even know what I was writing till it was on the page. And I was like, what's happening? What did she do? I was like, oh, this person's crazy. And truly, our female antagonist, she is crazy. I'm not going to lie. But we learn about her and go deeper into that because there's always a reason why people act how they act, right? But our little hero, Clive, if you will, he's just sick of the dating game. He's sick of people showing up being fake. He's sick of people, dating him because he's money and successful and all these things. And then his friend buys him a virtual dating reality app thing, right? And he goes in there, and Anna, the book nerd, who seems amazing, seems to tick all of his boxes, right? It's everything he's wanted. She likes the same things. It's like amazing, how am I getting this connection? And then weird things start to happen, right? But he starts to ignore all these red flags, like, why am I getting notifications even though I turned them off? Oh, maybe I forgot to turn them off. Maybe I didn't put my phone on airplane mode. How is it suddenly off airplane mode? Hang on, I don't remember having that song on my playlist. Like, all these weird little things start to happen, and he keeps pushing it away. And then in the meantime, he meets someone real. He meets someone in real life where he can have those vulnerable conversations and have those deep and meaningfuls. But his life starts to get turned upside down, and technology ends up being the thing that keeps him trapped. So, from the point he can't drive his car because his GPS is logged into everything. He can't, go on his phones. His bank accounts have been drained. He can't even order groceries because his smart fridge is now ordering ice cream and gummy bears or whatever it might be. So all of a sudden, all these things that he became to rely on to make his life easier have now put him in a prison. And it really starts to look at, if he wasn't so lonely, would he have made all those decisions? So the first part of the book, we get to know him really well. But the second part of the book is from Anna, the book nerd's point of view. So we actually go into what leads her from loneliness to obsession, what allows her to get to that point where she thinks it's okay to act how she's acting and doing all the things she's getting. But then there's this constant question in Clive's mind as well. Is this real, or is this AI, or is this what is this? And so we explore these deeper meaning, like, digital intimacy. What does that look like? How often you hear of people connecting with people on online apps, and then online apps, they're nothing like they portray themselves to be in real life, and I'm not against that. I met my husband now on an app, so I'm not against dating apps or anything like that. But it's when you portray yourself as somebody else, or who you think they want you to be, that it starts to get into these kind of traps. And the book invites you to go deeper. It invites you to start to look at those areas of your life where maybe you are lying to show up how you are, or maybe it is loneliness forcing you to make these decisions, because there's nothing wrong with being alone. But when you are making decisions from a point to avoid being with yourself, that is when you can get into trouble. And that is where you might be doing it because you feel numb or you feel stuck, and you just have all these expectations of yourself, your family, society, culture, of what your life is supposed to look like. And that is when you can get into these dangerous situations where you end up in a relationship and go, I don't know how to end this, but I know it's not for me.
I find it to be the existential crisis of identity today. I can see it in the future where, they have those VR headsets now. And there's in Houston, Texas, like they have a whole arcade now, it's virtual, where you go on, you wear these goggles and you can ride on things. So you're basically on a motorcycle, or you're in like a car or a Jeep, and the Jeep is moving while you're driving. So you're seeing everything as if you're driving for real, or riding a motorcycle for real, or in the forest for real. So life has become a virtual into that extent. And I can imagine one day our apps that we use for dating, whether it be like Tinder, Bumble, whatever it be, are now going to be virtual. So instead of going to dating events, you'll go to these virtual dating events where you have like Sims or characters that you create. And I can just imagine how many people are going to create a false identity. So they might not be this Chad and, all bulked up and have the nice slick back hair. They might be bald. And they're like, well, girls like, long hair. They like six pack abs. And so basically they're going to create this character thinking of what, he thinks that girls want, and vice versa. Girls will do that for what they think guys want. And then they're going to get two people who are incompatible. And then now we just are throwing our connective nature of human nature away, where you and I, we can speak all day, most likely, right? If you take two podcasters and put them in a room, you're going to get a great conversation, right? Number one. And number two, we're going to get something real versus something fake. And a lot of people are living in this fake dynamic of what a conversation is. Their friends even are all on the surface level. They're all reflective. They're all responsive, reactive, not so much of a deep inner meaningful conversation. And this is where I believe coaching does the best, where you can find somebody, get somebody who you have no affiliation with. And it's a lot easier if people don't know that. And if you don't know somebody, it's easier to tell them your shortcomings, your problems, things you want to work on. Because if you have to tell your friends or your family, now you have this idea, this stigma of now they're going to judge me. Now they're going to think of me some way, lesser or more. And that right there can be helpful if it's like more, like maybe more. But, we get into this habit of if I don't show up, then they're going to look down on me. And it's that fear that stops a lot of people. And so they would rather just remain normal, remain silent, remain hidden, remain in this sense of loneliness where they don't want to experience more in life per se. And so my final question to you is, if we know people are going down this mental obsession in life, whether it be from peer acceptance or just refusing to identify who they truly are right now and who they would like to be, is there a way where we can reverse some of the effects that the world is naturally gravitating toward?
I feel this is the importance of remembering that we're human, right? Like we actually need connection. We're built for connection. We're built to, I know personally, I much rather go speak to a room of people than do it on an online conference where I can't feel connected. I can do both, but I prefer to be in person with them. And even I have clients who go, hey, can I come see you if they live near me? I'm like, of course you can. You don't have to do it on Zoom. Just book it in and I'll just know in my mind you're not coming via Zoom, you're coming in person. Like it's fine. And you can have those deeper, meaningful connections. And, and it put the phones away. It's so funny. I got a new iPhone. And I had to Google how to turn it off because they changed the off button. You had to hit 2 buttons. And I was like, why are they making it so hard to turn off? Because they don't want us to disconnect it, right? They don't want us disconnected. But creating spaces where you have days where you're not on your phone or, can put your phone to the side for a few hours, leaving the phone at home. So often my husband and I will go out and we'll just leave our phones at home and it's so freeing. But then you almost have this little panic where you're like, oh my gosh, what if I need to transfer money? It's like, no, it's okay. I've got some cash. It's okay. It's okay. If not, whatever, we'll figure it out, And then my husband brought up this good point, when we were growing up, we had home phones. I know for any young listeners, they're like, you had home phones? Yeah, we had home phones that were connected to the wall and they had a cord and you couldn't walk away from them, right? So, and if people rang you and you didn't answer, there was no expectation that you had to call back or that there was something wrong because you weren't responding them. We've created through technology this urgency and this need to always respond. And sometimes I'm letting you know, you don't have to. You don't have to reply to that message that's really triggering or just makes you roll your eyes. Maybe you just need to send back a roll your eyes emoji. I don't know, but maybe you don't answer that phone call because you're not in the mindset to talk to your mom or your dad in that moment. Whatever it is, give yourself permission that you don't have to be fully available 24/7 for people because then you are giving away yourself too. So there's this flip side of connection where we feel like we have to be connected and have to be on all the time. But that leads to burnout. I can tell you right now, that is not a healthy way to live. Learning how to disconnect, go out into nature. It sounds so hippie, but, hug a tree, go barefoot. There's so much evidence showing how much that regulates your nervous system now. Or just create space to spend that time with your loved one. Go do something different. Go get a Groupon or whatever the equivalent is these days. I don't know. But, creating those different opportunities for yourself just to be you can be so important as well. And, the more you connect back to yourself, the more you will feel deeper connections with those around you. And those who aren't meant to be in your life, they'll just fade away and that's okay. There's that beautiful saying, people come into your life for a reason, a season, a cycle, or a lifetime. Allow them to cycle out or allow them to just be a moment, a season, or just be a reason. It's not a measure of who you are. It's just they were sent for that moment and they're gone again. And that's okay too.
Sometimes I like to accidentally leave my phone behind, and accidentally is in quotation marks, because you don't need to be connected at all times, especially like when you're in a life changing moment. And the life changing moment doesn't have to be like anything crazy. It could be just hanging out with your 4-year-old, right? It's like you're never going to get this again. And I can't tell you how many times people tell me this is like a broken record at this point. Cherish the time with your children. And I go, I know. I was a teacher. I was like, I know. And then, but it's always a nice reminder, because here I am to say, we have the opportunity right now. If you're listening to this, you are alive. You're not dead. That means you have life within you. You have actions that you can take. You have things that can be done. And you just have to have the invigoration to do it. So if you are a person who's feeling numb, if you're a person who's feeling lost, if you're a person who is stuck in an emotional balance of what the world is saying and what your inner critic is saying, then it's time for you to take action. You can reach out to Catherine. You can learn about what she's doing. You can check out some of her books. You can listen to her podcast. I'm going to have her name her podcast when she's saying her farewell. But this is this idea that there are so many people who want to see you win. There's so many people who want to see you do better, to see you be well, not just stuck in what the world says you should be stuck in. You shouldn't be glued to your phone. You shouldn't be locked in your house. You should be experiencing all the glory and the benefits of the world. So if you could, Catherine, can you please tell us some final thoughts and final words? And then please tell people how they can find you, your books, and then also the name of your podcast.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for the invitation, Michael. So I guess the biggest thing is that permission. It's okay to choose yourself. It's actually okay to say yes to you, because so often we learn to say yes to everybody else, but we forget about ourselves in that mix. So, really coming back to yourself and finding what brings you joy again, or playing with that and having fun with that, can help shift so many things in your life. I have so many stories where when a client's just decided to have fun, and they're like, oh, all these opportunities came from that. I'm like, yeah, because you have a different energy about you. People are excited to be around you because you've got this beautiful joy coming out of you again, which it was always there. It's just kind of buried for a little bit, And if people want to come connect with me, my website is willowhealing.org. I have a free 30-minute connection call. So if you're curious about what I do or how I work, feel free to come into my world. You can also find me a lot on Instagram, which my handle is willowhealingsh. My podcast is called Willow Healing Matters. So that's on YouTube or your favorite podcast players, or on Substack. And if you want to find my virtual obsession, it's on Amazon or your favorite ebook reader, or you can head to my website and get it there as well.
Perfect. And I'm going to make it easy for everyone. All the links are right down below, so you don't have to do any remembering, just some clicking. And we all know people like clicking in this world today. So click on something that's going to make your day better, that's going to make your life better, that's going to give you new perspectives on your day, your tomorrow, your week, your month, your year, and your whole entire life. And I do want to thank you, Catherine, for coming on, spending some time, having a great conversation. And then, of course, that moment we had before we hit record, that's life right there, where we could just experience the joy and then step into it wholly.
100%. And Michael, thank you so much for holding me and having this space. It's been amazing. Thank you.